We're going to start this session with a song from the NACA students, so we'll begin now.
All students. Introduce it. Goitzi Hopa Dawashra Wahiname Leroy Silva Governor Shashka Hanu Hapani Washji Goikam Goik So. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Leroy Silva, and we're going to open up this session with something similar to what we do with our community. So I'm going to ask everybody to go ahead and release everything that's in your hands, and we're going to join in a circle. So if we can make a circle away from the doors, that'd be great. So we can make a circle quick as possible. That'd be awesome. You guys are educators, so you guys know how to do this. Give you guys 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Robert, hurry. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I don't want to hear, oh, okay. So think about 380 students at the Native American Community Academy in Albuquerque meeting like this on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. So this is a way for us to acknowledge one another in a way based on our community. We are a community. We come from different families. We come from different tribes, different backgrounds. So this is a way and a space that we acknowledge you. So you are part of our extended family. And wherever you may be, we keep your families in mind. We keep our families in mind that, for the opportunity to be here. So we wanted to acknowledge you in that way. If there's any birthdays in the house today, good happy birthday. Bob Marley's birthday today. So again, we want to acknowledge you and open the space so that everybody has a positive start to their Saturday. So again, we'll go out with introductions after we share this song with you. Thank you. Dawe. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, and you can maybe go ahead and have a seat. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. All right, good. Everybody's awake.
All right, well, I feel better. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Mark Cruz, and I'm going to be moderating today's panel on the NACA Community School based in Albuquerque, Nebraska. And it's a great honor to be here today to do so. I'm really excited for you guys to be joining this session. This is a model that those of us here in Washington, D.C. have begun to look at. Just a quick introduction. My name is Mark Cruz. I'm originally from Klamath Falls, Oregon. I'm an enrolled member of the Klamath tribe, and I've lived and worked here in Washington, D.C. for the past 2.5 years. Before that, I got my master's in education policy, and before that, I taught at St. Francis Indian School on the Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota. I was a 2010 Corps member. So raise your hands, South Dakotans. Excellent. So I kind of have a home field advantage here today. So let me go ahead and introduce our panelists real quick. And after I do introduce each one, please give them a round of applause for making the journey here to Washington, D.C. First is Kara Bobroff. She is the executive director and principal at the Native American Community Academy. Kara is a lifelong educator and leader with more than 20 years of experience serving her community as a teacher and school leader. She is the founding principal of the Native American Community Academy. Under her leadership, NACA has been recognized as a model for effective indigenous education by the New Mexico Indian Education Subcommittee, the National Association of Secondary School Principals, as Breakthrough School, and Teach for America as a school to learn from. Kara is currently the executive director of the NACA-inspired Schools Network, the first school network in the nation that is focused on improving Native American education through a community-led engagement and transformation process. She is a 2005 Echoing Green Fellow and has received the Zia Award for University of New Mexico alumni for distinguished service in the field of education. Kara was recently appointed to President Obama's Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Please welcome Kara. Next, we have Duta Flyingerth. He is the head of school at NACA. Duta Flyingerth grew up on the Standing Rock Reservation in South Dakota and North Dakota. He is Lakota, Dakota, Ojibwe, and Akimel O'odham tribal nation. Duta is the youngest of three and a third-generation college graduate. He graduated from Cornell University with a BA in government. He is currently the head of school and the first associate director at the Native American Community Academy in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Duta joined NACA to assist in founding the charter school in 2006. In his capacity as co-founder and the head of school at NACA, Duta has been instrumental in representing NACA as a premier example of indigenous education nationwide. Duta has long been a learner of the Lakota language and has participated in language revitalization efforts that his grandmother, Patricia Locke, advocated for and developed during her lifetime. Please welcome Duta. Next, we have Missy Wanika. She's the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at NACA. Missy currently serves as the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at the NACA Charter School in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She is currently a Woodrow Wilson Fellow working toward an MBA ED degree at the University of New Mexico Anderson School of Business, as well as a NACA-based fellow in the NACA-inspired Schools Network. Please welcome Missy. Next, we have Lenny Morgan. Lenny is a former student at NACA and is currently a full-time undergrad student at UNM. Lenny calls Albuquerque home, but hails from the Dene Nation. as well as the Hunkpapa Lakota tribe. While attending school full-time, Lenny coaches basketball and will be teaching Lakota at NACA. Please welcome Lenny. Next, we have Leroy Silva. He is the Dean of Students at NACA. Leroy is from the Laguna Pueblo Nation in New Mexico. Mr. Silva is one of the founding teachers of the Native American Community Academy, serving since 2006. And today, he currently serves as the Junior and Senior Dean of Students. For the past 10 years, he has seen the NACA community transform into a place where everyone wants to learn and teach. Please welcome Leroy. And finally, we have Emmett Ipa. Emmett is an alumni of NACA. He was born and raised in the Jemez Pueblo in New Mexico. He's currently a senior at the University of New Mexico pursuing degrees in Native American Studies and Environmental Sustainability. Please welcome Emmett. And we have so much talent, we're going to bring up an additional guest at a later point in this presentation, but I'll go ahead and introduce her now, and if she'll stand after this brief introduction. Kayla Begay is the founder of the DEAP School. She is a Dene woman from the community of Navajo, New Mexico. Kayla is the co-founder of DEAP. She's worked with the community of Navajo and in partnership with the NACA Inspired Schools Network to create a charter school based in the community vision. DEAP opened in September 2015 with a focus on college and career readiness through an indigenous core of Navajo empowerment, experimental learning through agriculture, wellness, community leadership, and service learning. Kayla believes DEAP is more than just a school, and it is a way to empower and rebuild the community of Navajo Nation. Welcome, Kayla. So one of the reasons why this panel is here and what you guys are going to be learning today is right now there are immense challenges facing Native American education. And one of the things as policymakers at the federal and state level is for generations, if not centuries, we have dictated what successful education should look like for our tribal people. And over these generations, as we'll go through today, it's been a very top-down approach. And what makes NACA unique is they are a bottom-up approach, and it's working. And when you empower the local folks to make the decisions on behalf of their own people, great things can happen. And today, through their stories, you're going to kind of witness and listen to just exactly how they're accomplishing that at NACA. You're going to learn where they came from, where they're at now, and where they're moving at in the future. So, a couple of the objectives here today are that you guys go away inspired, that the hard work that these folks are doing out in Albuquerque, and hopefully it plants an idea in your mind with what's possible in your own communities, whether it's another tribal community, whether it's in an urban area, whether it's in a rural area. But there's a template here that is grounded in vision and passion, and we're going to extrapolate that. So the less talking I do and the more talking they do, the better. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Kara and Duta. NACA is the feature case study at this panel, and it affirms that cultural identities that are unique to Native and Indigenous students and communities. So I'm going to start with this question. Why NACA? Why have we elevated this story, and why do we believe so deeply in this school? And I will kick that to Kara and Duta.
You hear me okay? Awesome. Thank you, Mark. I think to answer that question, we think of what we're doing in terms of our legacy. We all come from a legacy that has a story, has an origin, and we teach our students that. That goes further back than what U.S. history books tell us. So the graphic you see in the presentation is kind of how we think of eras of education for our people. We absolutely need to, and it's imperative that we acknowledge a pre-colonial history of education that existed within our communities. That is the genius, that is astronomy, that is ethnobotany, that is mathematics, that is sociology and philosophy. Not called those words in our communities, but that those exist. And we have to understand that far more than the deficits that there may be pervasive in telling the story of Indian education are our strengths. So we think about indigenous education in that way. The next chevron that you would see is the Americanization schooling system that we acknowledge happened in our communities that are boarding schools, that is captured by the motto of "Kill the Indian, save the man," and understanding that it was policy, it was legislation that said we must remove what makes indigenous people indigenous. And assimilate them into this education. I think that is very important to acknowledge, very important to understand in the history of this education, and it still is pervasive in our communities in how education is looked at. As we get into the next chevron, we see the idea of Native American education. I think that's marked by some of the legislation in the 50s with the Indian Education Act, the Self-Determination Act, that really paved the way for tribal colleges, paved the way for tribally controlled grant schools. So we see an effort to try to put the power back in the hands of tribes. But the prior era needs to be acknowledged in terms of the paternalism that has been learned. So fast forward to now. The movement that we feel like we're engaged in is indigenous education. Once again, it's not the first era, and I think there's no way to get back to that because there's an understanding of the evolution and the legacy that we all carry. But indigenous education is the convergence of who we are within the education system that we experience on a daily basis. All of us experience on a daily basis, and what does that look like is the biggest question that we ask ourselves. For so long, our model of education has had to exist outside of what we conceive of as American schools or United States schools. What we're seeking to do within our movement of education is hold this model and these core values at the center, as we'll talk about later, and articulate everything that happens within that philosophy, within that ideology, to really start to actualize what is indigenous education, what is community-based indigenous education. And it means different things to different people. And I don't think it's worth nailing down, this is exactly verbatim what indigenous education is, because it changes from community to community, as you'll see later on. But we felt like that was important to kind of establish the context based upon our strengths, acknowledging some of the more negative aspects, but knowing that that is not the impetus for what we do. The impetus for what we do is our students, our ancestors, the need to articulate who we are now, because it's gonna happen. It happens for us regardless. And so I think this is really kind of like sets the stage for our story of how the school was started.
Okay. The next question I have is, Kara, what made you think of doing this?
Yeah.
What was the inspiration for NACA?
So, good afternoon. My name is Kara. I'm Navajo and Lakota. It's good to see you guys. I didn't actually think of this idea whatsoever, so I just want to put that out there first. I grew up in Albuquerque, and I went to the public school system where my family went. My parents were both educators. My mom was a teacher in middle school for her entire life, as well as my father taught, was a school leader and superintendent in our city. But what was blatantly absent from my experience and experience of many other Native students 80,000 student school district, and I think this is probably also something that's pretty broad for any students that are bringing with them a important contextual history, but also an identity that is often not supported in schools, is that there's an absence of role models, an absence of curriculum, an absence of relevance that takes place and does not make schools have that sense of connection for folks. So I experienced that personally growing up, but also as a teacher. I taught at the same school I went to, saw the way that things were structured, and the feeling that I felt within the school itself was really evident when I went back as an adult, as a teacher and a special education teacher. I could see like how students were picked for certain things, different things like that. So that started to kind of come together. Had the opportunity to work in a pretty affluent school district in Northern California as a dean of students, and saw the opportunity that those kids had in education that we did not have in the city where I grew up. And started to just kind of question, like, how do we take a school that's thriving, that's responsive to the community, and have that in my hometown or on the Navajo Reservation or in San Francisco or Oakland, wherever that might be at that time. Why this was going on, I would say a good 20 years, 30 years, there's educators that came before me that had a personal narrative and same experience and stories, but they also saw that there was an opportunity to change that for Native students in our city. When our superintendent created a council on equity, this was right after No Child Left Behind was established, they started to disaggregate data and looking at the outcomes for Native students and saw that they were dramatically different than those of other students. So the discussion said, what started to happen, like, what can we do to change that? So this idea permeated over 20, 30 years, kind of in concepts and like discussions around, I imagine, like in schools, outside of schools, became more evident as like data started to really point to that. And I think that as those things started to converge, I would always kind of check back in with folks. And when I had the opportunity after serving as a principal in the Navajo Nation for 2 years, where there was a huge disconnect between the school district and students in that district, to the point where some folks thought learning your language was a deficit and kept you from learning how to read, where parents weren't necessarily welcome into the schools, and their expectations for students were very low as to even questioning whether or not they should go to college. So seeing the total opposite of what was possible, when I returned home, started to connect with people, both in the school system and also with an Indigenous women's group. We started to talk about like whether this is a good idea and like what would we want to see from that. That conversation started with 1 or 2 people, and some of the folks that their kids go to our school now, they work at our school, and they're like, yes, this is absolutely something we want to do. And the question was like, how do we do this? Do we do it as a magnet or we do it as a charter? I think that's really important when you're thinking about community-based, initiatives, but also doing work with your community, is that it's not necessarily the structure so much, but it's what's the mission and vision behind it. We took over a year and a half to really engage people in the personal narrative and a collective narrative about what students were experiencing, what their families were experiencing, both good and bad, what had worked, what had not worked, and the most important question at that time was like, what would you like to see in an ideal school? Thus the mission and vision for NACA, basically engaging a community to create a school that would support our students from adolescence to adulthood in aspects of who they are, with the main things being and the outcomes being like that they're actively prepared for higher learning, that they're secure in their identity and healthy. The stories that I heard from my, fellow community members really kind of got at their personal experiences and how that connected to those 3 outcomes. A holistic kind of wellness philosophy is the foundational aspect of our school, and students being healthy. That students have a strong sense of identity, because a lot of stories really did get at the issue around not feeling welcome in the school, or having even some internalized racism that was going on in people's experiences over time. And that might be like families, grandparents, down to the students that were in school when we were having these conversations, and people wanting to have that different, right? And then also, the college aspect of that was really, really important. So I would say that the idea was something that had permeated. It was something that we all felt and knew, but it was just a matter of bringing people together in a way that could really realize a lot of the ideas that a lot of research has written about, that we know that culture is a good thing, we know that communities should be engaged, we know that language is a strength, we know that holistic wellness is a way that connects kids to school, and we know that core values and all these other things are really important in Indigenous communities. So we brought all of those things together in a shared mission and vision, and then executed that into an actual school model. So, okay.
Sounds easy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. No, impressive work. One of the things I want to touch on really quickly before I transition is, can you kind of elaborate on some of the dynamic of how the power structure shifted what kind of jurisdictional challenges you faced as this leader early on in the creation of NACA?
So I would say one thing that was evident was at a school where there was a lot of responsiveness to families, and community was like definitely in Marin County, right? Where everything was like, how do we serve these kids well? And teachers were responsive, the administration, and there wasn't like a kind of 3 strikes and you're out experience that I experienced in my school district. So by we thought about a magnet or a charter. We utilized the charter aspect because it really gave us a blank slate to create something from the ground up without any obstacles. There's an educator and researcher named Graham Smith who talks about this idea of transformation, and we really talked about that in the sense like we didn't want to have the mindset that we were being marginalized or oppressed, but really creating something that was truly transformative. So I believe it was a mindset that was really, really important to have, because there are plenty of obstacles and challenges along the way for sure. The other thing is finding partners who had this shared in the same will and the same kind of effort. So we were a collaborative charter with our school district, which was really great. Some of the schools that are coming on in their communities right now don't have that relationship necessarily, and it's a lot tougher for them. But again, starting with the idea of like, what's the mission and vision, then what's the right thing to support that, whether it's a charter, a magnet, and or a grant school. And we have another young man here who works within the BIE system itself, but really engaging people in that first, and then figuring out how do you build the things alongside that to support it going forward.
Great, thank you. At this point, I want to incorporate our other panelists as well by kind of transitioning from the humble roots of NACA and getting to learn more about the system structures and the actual values of the school and what day-to-day NACA, the NACA experience, what that looks and feels like. Really quick, to Duta, in what ways do you see NACA shifting the paradigm of education, where the narrative has largely been to check your identity at the door and not acknowledging what's happened in the communities in the past?
So what you see up there is a wellness wheel, and so this is one of our major teaching tools. And so if you look at the quadrants, the way we conceptualize what this looks like on a daily basis is the student as a whole person. You see that there's an intellectual wellness piece. This, more often than not, is where many schools, and in my own schooling, that I felt like operated out of and from, just maintaining and measuring it against what were my grades, how was I doing in school. As we begin to talk, as Kara was saying, this is one of the major cornerstones for NACA education, and is kind of a training tool, and both, yesterday, 380 of our students engaged this tool with their parents and families in a self-assessment tool. So the way that I think about it is conceptualizing students as the whole child, thinking about how is their physical wellness, understanding that in our communities, and not just indigenous communities, there are health disparities. There are also many strengths that our people come from. The social emotional aspect of it as well as another one that community and relationships, and this, how are you functioning within your family, within your community, within your city, within your tribe, within your country, and having them conceptualize themselves as being a part of something larger. And so I think this fundamental paradigm, the kind of mindset that Kara talked about, it really comes to life with this tool. Is really like where the daily, when rubber hit the road kind of thing, where our teachers use this on a daily basis. As you'll see later on, there's also some core values, and I feel like in a school with over 60 different tribes and in a city with over 200 different tribes, the question of how do you navigate everyone's identity, and even for me, where I'm Dakota, Lakota, Ojibwe, and O'odham, and French, Irish, and Scottish, it wasn't in my intro. How do we navigate our own identities given the complexity of our identities? And I think we have to walk that fine balance of being inclusive but not overgeneralizing. And I think that's unlocked by students. It's unlocked by their own journeys through their own identities, because it's not right for me as Mr. Flyer to come in and tell Emmett or Lenny that this is who you are and this is what you need to study and this is what's important to you. I think, but it's up to me to kind of facilitate that. And I think this is a tool, as well as our core values, in how that happens on a daily basis, and is a key cornerstone. And hopefully Missy will speak on it, of how we develop curriculum at NACA as well.
Yeah. One of the things that makes NACA so unique is the fact that their students have to complete 2 to 4 years of language immersion courses. And I would like to kind of open it up to the panel if you feel like you want to speak on this, but I understand that due to you do most of the native language instruction. Why is this important? And what is the expectation given the unique challenges of having such a diverse student population?
I'll say a little bit about it, and then I want to hear. I'm interested to see what Lenny's actually. So I stepped back into the classroom this semester, and I guess Lenny's my student teacher. But so very quickly, I didn't grow up speaking my language. My mom didn't speak, my grandma didn't speak. My great-grandparents both spoke, but they met at Carlisle and didn't teach my grandmother or any of my grandparents. And so it was actually through songs, that I unlocked language learning, and I've come to really value and really cherish language. And anyone that I think that learns a language realizes that you unlock all kinds of things when you start to learn language. Things are funnier in different languages. There's a piece of your own identity that then becomes like a magic wand, in terms of like, man, I didn't know that knowing how to say in my introduction would make me feel like that. And so there's things you can't put into words that when you speak your language, we really feel. So we have 5 languages at NACA. So we have Navajo, Lakota, Tiwa, Keres, and Zuni. Lakota happened, actually, that's why I'm gonna reflect it back to Lenny. Lenny was the one who helped create Lakota language, and I just think there's no way to separate culture from language and vice versa, and it becomes it's an essential tool to the actual development of one's identity in some form or fashion, whether they choose to learn it at NACA or they speak it at home. So we can probably have a whole panel on language, and I'd love to talk about it, but I'm gonna throw it back to Lenny.
Let's hear from Lenny real quick. Can you kind of describe your experience with having to take the courses?
Hello. Okay, so I'm gonna flash back to 2006 real quick, give you the quick rundown of the story. So I was 11 years old. It was my first time outside of the normal, I guess, education system, and I met Lekshi Dutta, and I found out that he knew how to speak, more or less learning Lakota. And coming from the education system that I came from, it was very interesting because I had not yet known who I really was yet. And I remember my grandfather's old Bible, and I brought it to him, and I was like, "Can you help me? Can you show me what this means?" And then from there, it took off, and we started a Lakota language class. So 10 years to the present day now. I am not fluent. I'm a second language learner. I'm on my way to becoming fluent. I plan to, and it's something that has really helped with my identity. It's allowed me many opportunities to find that strength within myself, to become, a very well-rounded individual who's strong in her identity and is able to accomplish life goals. So going back to the question, language is required at NACA for the total of 4 years, and that's something that personally I really enjoyed. It's given me, the confidence in myself to say who I am, where I come from, and this is who I represent.
Was the language something that you were also learning at home, or was it something that was just occurring at school? Would you have had the opportunity otherwise to learn your language?
So, as a Lakota person, my homeland is like 1,000 miles north of where I am, and that gave me no opportunity to learn my language at home. My grandfather passed away before he could teach my mom, and I remember that she taught me how to count to like 5, basic, animal names, things like that. So I had no other opportunity to learn until I found NACA.
Emmett, what can you describe kind of your experience taking these courses and how they helped?
Yeah, for sure. Good afternoon. My name is Emmett Yepa from the Pueblo of Jemez, like he mentioned. So where I come from, we speak the Toa language, which is one of a kind. It's not spoken anywhere else other than Jemez, where I'm from, my community. And so I'm not fluent in my language, but I'm fluent listening. I don't know if that makes sense. But like Lenny and Duta had mentioned, language is required all 4 years, but I went to NACA my junior year. So I took language 2 years, and the language of the 5, I chose Lakota. And so part of the reason for that is because where I'm from, realizing that it's one of a kind, I just kind of wanted to, I guess, make my language skills a little bit better, knowing other languages, and being a Paua singer, Lakota, that's part of their way of life, and it's not my way of life. So that was kind of a way I thought, a pathway to appreciate the type of singing that I do, and language is important to kind of to appreciate the different cultures that we all represent. So yeah, and NACA could allow me to appreciate that.
Great. One of the things we find is students have a higher self-esteem when they have the opportunity to learn their language and their history and their culture. And when there's a lack of that opportunity, sometimes students act out behaviorally, for example. And so I want to ask the dean, Mr. Silva, a question. What has that experience look like for you, given your role? Does it help students? How are you able to play this role as kind of the dean of the school, but also make sure that culture and language are important components to a student's self-worth?
Well, that's a good question. As a dean of students, I for the past 3 years, I've come into a lot of experiences where students definitely they bring a lot of baggage. As educators, that are some of our students that maybe education is not the first thing on their mind. That maybe something at home is going on. Culturally, I feel that when they know their roles, because as Indigenous people within our communities, we have certain roles that men are supposed to do, that females are supposed to do. So I think when students have a good grasp of, what does that mean? They have a strong identity. They know how to speak. I feel that, and that also too that they have that sense of where they come from, and different communities have their different ways of praying, of kind of giving back. So I feel that, and my experience too, just chatting with students, and I've seen the students grow since they were 6th and 7th graders, and when they get to know that part of, even if it's just a little part of their identity of who they are, whether it's language, whether it's how to put up a teepee, whether it's they know a prayer, that I feel that's strong enough for them to believe in, but also to share with their families. So I feel that when it comes to discipline, when it comes to behaving themselves, they have something to go back to. Is that I shouldn't be acting this way because I'm Pueblo, so one of our spiritual places is the Kiva. So what I would conduct myself in the same manner I would in a kiva, meaning you treat people well, you abide by people, whoever is giving you advice, you take it in. So certain things like that that has those strong ties to community. And I feel that, Emmett, we're both Pueblo, and he's very, he participates a lot in his Pueblo. So, just knowing him from a very small, from a young age, that he's a prime example of what that means. So if you see him, if you ever come to Jemez or you ever see him sing, he just has a demeanor about him that certain protocols have to be put into place. That you have to conduct yourself in a manner of you can't just kind of wild out and misbehave or anything like that. So I feel that culture, whether it's great or small, that students have a good sense of where they come from is, that's enough for them to have that connection.
Excellent. Yeah,
I just
please.
wanted to add something to that. As I think going back to kind of the engagement of families early on was really important, because not only did we engage in the conversation about like what should the school do, but it was building relationships through that. So as people were getting to know each other, they were also hearing each other's stories. So it wasn't just a one-way dynamic like teachers and parents in the school, right? The dynamic was built among our entire community. So our first 120, students, our families had an opportunity to connect to each other and really build strong relationships with each other, which I think is really important. And so they play a huge role in our school as far as like supporting the kids throughout the time that they're there, whether it be 7 years or 4 years, as well as their advisor, and making a strong connection around a set of core values that I think is really important to think about. Like, it's kind of the glue and the fabric that keeps us together. I think for any one tribe, there's like something that's similar. For your community, if you think about what your family and your community have that are strengths that you kind of go back to those tenets, whatever those things are, or something maybe your mother or your father or your grandmother or grandfather shared with you, might be one of those things. But as we were building the school, we were building a foundation of strong relationships, a sense of ke, which is a Navajo word for family, and the relationships and roles within that. So that work was really important up front, because there's many times where we would have to draw upon both our family and our community in order to be successful and sustain what it was we were doing. So can't underscore that enough, but just wanted to add that too.
Absolutely. Duta, a lot of us in this room haven't actually been to campus. Real quickly, can you tell me about the physical space of the building you're in and how that speaks to your mission and vision?
Yeah. Well, so who's actually been to NACA in here?
All right.
Oh, there's a good number. So we're actually in one of the last standing buildings of the old Albuquerque Indian School, which is an interesting kind of history. I think it goes back to the historical context I gave. So our 6 through 10 students are in that building, and there was an interesting kind of story that started to evolve, where the narrative became righting a wrong, and we didn't necessarily gravitate towards that, because it seemed to come from a deficit in terms of like we're gonna somehow overcome what happened to us, and I think there's feelings of that, but much more powerful, I think, are the passions and strengths of our community, and the purpose and the mission and the vision of what we're trying to do, that's rooted in generations to come, that is catalyzed by our ancestors and who we come from and the legacies that we represent. So all that thinking about our campus, and we actually had a couple service projects where we're now starting to define our campus according to some of our communities. So we have some traditional structures going up. We'll have a sweat lodge there. We'll have some shade structures. We'll have some traditional ovens, all within the idea of how we're conceptualizing school as a community, school as a family. You hear a lot of our teachers say that, I feel like we're a family. We'll call each other brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews, and cousins, and many of our, that's even protocol in my community, is to acknowledge each other as tunja, tunja, hunkashi, trahashi, And so we try to set that up because we believe that the school should not be a secular unit to the community, and that in fact they should be very much immersed. And as the story that Kara told about the creation of the school, that's how it happened. So it was very easy that kind of carried over. And then our 11th and 12th graders are over at the UNM School of Law, and so they have an experience of the creation of a place that is a community, a home, with the experience of being on a college campus and at a law school campus at that, and just getting that feel, which both of these students had the opportunity to do. And so, as we think about that, it's still conceptualizing education within the confines of a building, but on our terms.
Okay, I want to ask the students a couple questions here, just so you guys kind of hear from the alumni of the school. To Lenny and Emmett, you had a school experience before NACA and one after NACA. If you had to describe the top 3 things that were fundamentally different at NACA, what are they, and why are they important for you?
So I was attending a public school in Jemez Valley High School. It was normal setting, public school. The experience was kind of average. One thing that separates that school from NACA, there's quite a bit of things. So commutes, one thing, took me 5 minutes to get to school from Jemez, but I made the effort and committed to NACA once I transferred to NACA, which was an hour commute to Albuquerque. So train, city bus, shuttle was my daily route. So long days, but it was worth it because the experience in NACA is unique. You can't find it anywhere else. One thing that it allowed me to do was kind of form my identity. I was kind of confused at the time, being able to express myself and who I wanted to be. So one thing that's emphasized is culture. NACA is really culturally, it's diverse. Different cultures are represented, different languages, different types of students. And so being able to become familiar with different heritage and kind of making connections to different communities was one thing that I was able to do, because in Jemez, mainly just Jemez students are there. And so my family raised me based off our culture, and so being able to also learn other cultures was something that was a good experience. And college preparation was pretty huge. It allowed me to prepare myself to go out of state. My freshman year, I was in Wisconsin, so quite a ways from home. And so that was a unique experience in itself because I was one of 5 native students on campus. So that was a huge shock to me, and something that I knew I was going to face. And NACA prepared me not only for that, but for the academic part, being able to balance the Western knowledge and education system with an indigenous knowledge system. So balancing those two was key, which I don't think I would have received at the public school, and I received at NACA. And the support system is definitely the best thing. Teachers, classmates, everyone's really close. And so that's ultimately why I love NACA, and it's changed my life forever. It allowed me to be who I am, being a singer, loving my language, culture, especially the singing aspect of it, I think was the best part for me, because I sing Pawa, and I've been singing Pawa since I was young, and having the opportunity to sing with Duta, have our own little club, Pawa club, that was pretty fun. Every first of the month, and for first of the month we have morning circles, where we just similar to what we did. So that was one thing that's really unique. Every morning we have morning prayers. And so those are 2 of the things that weren't done at the public school, which is done at NACA. And yeah, it changed my life forever, and I'm thankful for everything in the experience.
We appreciate your story.
Okay, so one of the things that was really different for me while attending NACA, So I go to college now, and the things that that college has in common with my primary education, which was in the public school system, you know, they teach you the things like the basics, like here's what you need to know, how to read, how to add. In college is the same way. Here's what you need to know for the test. Good luck. But my education at NACA, it's very interesting, you know, Western education combined with traditional teachings. So I'm going to take you to my 8th grade class. It was a mix of science and humanities. 2 of my favorite teachers taught that class, and that was the turning point for me, you know. It was the turning point for me in a lot of different ways. So in this class, and mind you, it wasn't a classroom that I learned in. The most valuable life lessons that I've ever learned was not in the classroom. We, our 8th grade class, we made a garden. We made a community garden. We grew our own food. From that, you know, the science part of it, you know, we learned about plants, photosynthesis, all that good stuff. But the interesting part of it was, you know, why is it important? You know, why don't we grow our own food anymore? And then from that, once we got to that level of like, why aren't we doing this anymore? It moved on to the level of like, you know, we're not doing this because we live in the city. Why do we live in the city? Land appropriation. Oh, what is that? You know, like our people's history, stuff like that. So, and from that point, it made me, the switch happened, and you know, I was like, okay, so what am I gonna do about this? What's next? How am I gonna be an integral part of, you know, changing how my people go about furthering us and taking us out of this, well, not taking us out of this, but bettering ourselves to give, you know, ourselves a better future. And just that switch, you know, I got from my 8th grade class, making a garden. Another thing is the mentor-student relationship. So I've known all these wonderful people for more than half my life now. And the great thing about it is not only, you know, do they support us and love us and give us the tools and knowledge we need to be culturally strong, you know, intelligent people, but they also have like these deep and meaningful conversations with us that, you know, allow us to reflect on who we are and where do we go next, while also being happy, culturally strong people. And you know, it gives me a lot of time to figure out my future endeavors, and that's my experience at NACA.
Great, thank you very much. Beyond the student experience, so a lot of this requires some program development, right? And so I want to turn this into kind of a quick conversation about curriculum and the work that Ms. Juanica and Mr. Silva are doing. We'll turn over to Ms. Juanica real quick. Can you name 2 or 3 decisions that you've made to ensure that your curriculum prepares kids for college? And can you name 2 or 3 curriculum decisions that has set them up for success?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So again, my name is Missy Juanica. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction at NACA. And I think, you know, we have always felt at NACA that it was important to prepare students for college through a relevant education. And I think, you know, that's difficult for people who sometimes see that one of those things should sacrifice for the other, or that they're competing. And, you know, we keep that at the front of our minds every day. And so I'm going to share a little bit about our sort of reading classes. So when NACA started, students took the class Native Literature as their reading course, and that's still true today. They take a Native Literature course in grades 6 through 10. But a couple of years ago, we, after speaking to some of our first alumni about that transition of studying Native literature all of the way through their middle and high school years, and then transitioning to college and, you know, being placed in English 101 or, you know, these sort of classical literature courses where they're reading Shakespeare, you know, and we still really think reading modern and historical works by Native authors is the best foundation, but that transition wasn't happening as naturally as we had hoped. So we actually decided to bring in AP English in 11th and 12th grade, and that was a really difficult decision because we really pride ourselves on, homegrown, culturally relevant curriculum, and we struggled with that thought about bringing in this AP curriculum, that was sort of dictated by other people. But I think it's been one of the best decisions that we've made over the past few years, and we really get to test that hypothesis about, that the foundation of Native American literature in grades 6 through 10 really sets our students up very well to then read classical works in grades 11 and 12 and read and write at the college level. And we feel very confident when they're graduating that they're going to be able to succeed in those ways. So that's one decision that was difficult, but a good one. And I think another one that's, I don't know if it's a decision so much as just something that's organically been happening, is that I think, we focused a lot on the content and even the techniques that we would use to teach students. So our history classes are really based around indigenous perspectives and, honor our students' identities. But what we didn't maybe account for so well or intentionally was the emotional needs of students in studying a really difficult and horrific history. And so I think, that's another thing that came out of conversations with our alumni is that that's an obstacle. If you walk into a college setting and you're learning about, things that happened to your ancestors and you're faced with all these emotions that you don't really know how to work through, and you're, maybe out of state, maybe you don't have a support system. So we've been thinking a lot more about how to equip our teachers to build that into their curriculum, as well as to think about, like, in a student's day or year, how to provide space and time for them to work through that sort of trauma and to move, it's okay for them to feel angry at times, but then to move beyond that to action. And so I feel like that shift was really important for us to think about that emotional need of the students.
Mr. Silva, why do you focus on college? Is that a culturally indigenous value? What led you to focus on college acceptance for every student?
Well, just going back to what Missy mentioned, is that we wanted to prepare our students for, so that they're ready, and that's in our mission and vision, that they're academically prepared. But another part of it is that I have to give some props to is our college engagement team, and I feel that that's been a huge part of the reason why our students are successful is that basically we're breaking down the walls as far as like the mentality of what our students have. And from the director's point of view, the director of the college engagement team, she says that we want to have they want to have the family say that every student can go to college, whether they feel that they're not smart enough, they're not rich, they're not good looking, things like that, all of these factors. But every student can go to college. And so that's the mentality our college engagement team has. I feel that they prepare them emotionally as well, because it's a huge step if you go out of state, you're far away from home, especially if you're a first generation college student. That's another support that we have, is that, getting through the FAFSA, getting through, filling out college scholarships. We have Gates, we have like Daniel scholarships, all of that. If the rundown of that, there's a lot of essays, there's a lot of time and energy that needs to go into those, prepping for the ACT. So I feel that that's a huge part of our success is our college engagement team. So I think too is that the mentality that our students have coming from first generation. I'm a first generation college graduate. And my mom had that mentality block of, I wasn't smart. I thought I wasn't smart enough to go to college, so I didn't. So for me, it's like we want to change the game for our students. So when it starts with them, that continue on. So the whole perspective is for them to share that with their families. If they have, especially if they have siblings, if they have young cousins, it's that Emmett and Lenny are doing it, then I can do it. So you're changing the perspective of your family, you're changing your perspective of your community. So I feel that the reason is not, the big drive is not money. is that I want to be a lawyer because I want to make X amount of dollars. I want to be a doctor because I want to make X amount of dollars. But I feel just being around NACA and going on our 5th graduating class, I feel that what drives these students is their passions. And I feel that they find their passions when they get closer to graduation, is that even though they don't know exactly what they want to do, but they want to go back to the communities and make a difference, whatever that may be, whether it be traditionally, they're going to go back to helping their elders. They want to make people more aware of agriculture. They want to, we still have the people who want to be doctors and, NBA players, things like that. But, the whole focus is on community. So, and that's one thing that I always remember growing up is my grandparents always telling me is that, yeah, that's good. You go to college and you come back and you help our people. So I think that's in most indigenous cultures and even, everybody. I mean, I feel that getting educated and, putting a lot of tools in your toolbox so you could go back to your family and communities and help in that manner.
Great. There's so many cool things I can discuss about NACA, and so I want to try to get through a few more major issues. One of them is how NACA takes student wellness so seriously. So if we can go to slide 9 really quick, and in a couple of minutes, can you Native American communities face significant disparities in physical and mental health. Tell us about your wellness wheel and how your staff and students use this, and then I'll follow up with each member of the panel. Slide 9. We'll get there. 9.
So the way that our students and staff use the wellness wheel is on a quarterly basis. There's 2 things that happen. One, a self-assessment. So they think of all aspects of the wellness wheel, and so there are actually 12 aspects of it if you separated the quadrants. And ask them to think about a self-reflection according to how they're feeling. So there's everything from nutrition to spirituality to sustainability, and just really kind of, having the adults and having the teachers, having the staff be the mentor to help them think through what does that look like. And so I think, Lenny and Emmett have done a few dozen wellness wheels for sure. And just thinking about like how does that happen, and I feel like it goes back to that mindset. It goes back to how we envision wellness on a daily basis. It carries out in every one of our jobs, and so it can't just be because Leroy is the fittest at the school. He's the only guy that thinks about wellness, right? Like we all have to do it. We all have to think about what does that look like for us, and so. It's awesome to see the transformation that our students and staff go through as a result, and the change in diet, the change in mindset, the change in reflection, and having to be the model and to walk our talk, and also to encourage our students to do it. And so it has to be a full-on integration into our school. On a weekly basis, on a quarterly basis, intentionally, and thinking about that. And so the 3 aspects that Kara started with in our mission, the academically prepared, secure in identity, and healthy, everyone should be thinking about that at NACA, and how do those 3 things fit into Lakota language, how do those 3 things fit into math, how do those 3 things fit into AP, and really helping to conceptualize what that looks like, but also having a time and a space for the relationship, advisor to advisee, advisor to students, relative to relative, thinking about that process, thinking about what does that look like for each individual student, and carving out time for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to give Lenny and Emmett one last question as a follow-up to this before we kind of transition. Real quickly, guys, both of you, can you describe one way, now that you're outside of the walls of NACA, that the wellness wheel continues to play out in your daily life?
Okay, so I'm going to tie this into one of the core values, and that's reflection. Reflection is one of the biggest parts of. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Oh, so thank you.
Reflection is something that I do every single moment. Even up here, I'm reflecting. So the wellness wheel. I do a lot. I am a student, I work, I coach, now I'm teaching. So it's a lot. And for me, throughout the day, if I'm feeling any sort of frustrations, I'm like, okay, why am I frustrated? Did I eat today? Did I work out? Have I prayed? Is my family okay? Is my relationships okay? You know, being balanced on every single level of your life, it's something that I value deeply about myself, being able to reflect, to gauge that level of, you know, health that is me. So that's something that I utilize every single day. And it's interesting because when I first started NACA, I was like, why are we doing this every single day? I can't understand it. And now I'm like, oh, that's what that's for.
Cool. I think sitting here reflecting, I think I noticed one of the things that hasn't been mentioned are the NACA core values. And so there are 6 of them. And so they are respect, responsibility, reflect, perseverance, culture, and community and service. And so I also want to tie in one of the core values into my wellness well experience. And yeah, it's stressed upon us doing it. And Miss Barbara, being my advisor, she was stressed dead and made me do it every time we met. So I was prepared. But one of the core values that I'm passionate about is community and service. And so doing the wellness well, I had a reflective moment. I put 2 of my passions together, which is the environment and my community of Jemez. And so through that, I was able to establish our very own first recycling center in Jemez, a recycling program that I put together with a couple of classmates from Jemez. We were called the Walatoa Green Stars. And so that's one thing that I live out every day is sustaining the earth and the environment, because I really believe where I'm from in Jemez and everywhere else is beautiful. The lands are majestic and everything about it, it's what I love. It's home to me. And so being able to go back to my community and try to make an impact through my recycling group and just my service to the community and its members is what I try to emphasize the most, which is also entails responsibility and respect, and perseverance and culture. Thank you.
At this time, guys, can we give the 2 students a round of applause for joining us today? Thank you. And then we'll have Kayla come on up.
And just as they're walking out, I just want to add one thing. They're both Gates finalists and amazing leaders in our community. Of, like, at any time we can call them and ask them, like, hey, would you mind going to DC and talking a little bit about NACA? And they're like, sure. Ms. Barbara, would you like to come over and like work with some of our students and are constantly giving their time back? So I really appreciate it. Thank you guys a lot. You guys are awesome.
Okay, so we're going to speak real quickly about the work and the vision moving forward for a few moments. But in these moments, I want you as the audience to begin thinking of your own questions. Before the end of the session, we're going to open up the mic here at the front of the room for you to ask our panelists a few questions before we conclude. So in this next segment, go ahead and start letting your mind percolate on what you would like to get to. So NACA started off as one school, but to have the maximum impact, it decided to expand. And so I want to talk to our new guest here, Kayla and Kara, about what led you to want to expand and how is it going? Just can you update the audience?
So I think when we were first established, we had a lot of visitors and a lot of folks just asking how we do what we do. We had the opportunity and the great support of one of our foundations to really take a look at like what we were doing well, what we needed to improve upon, and how to share that. So 3 things came up. One was to co-create a teacher preparation program with Central New Mexico Community College that took the NACA framework and basically imported that into a series of 6 courses that worked with 30 teachers to get them certified that were like Duta and Buster actually were in those cohorts of people who were drawn to the mission and vision that was created by the community and really wanted to participate in the school but may had not come to teaching through any other kind of like method. The second was thinking about an Indigenous education network. We'd had a lot of schools that would come and maybe a teacher or a principal or somebody who's really passionate, like most of you I'm sure are in your communities, thinking about like how can we make education relevant and better for our students and families. And what we found that happened is a lot of times those folks would go back to their communities and maybe institute the wellness wheel in a classroom, or maybe a principal would try to engage their teachers, but it wasn't something that was mission-wide and community-wide. I can't speak enough about the idea of programs not being fragmented. When we started, we heard a lot of things like if there was a Navajo language teacher at a certain high school and that principal was supportive, awesome. You had that for a year or two until that principal left or something fell. A lot of times, a lot of the programs for Native students, and I think probably if you generalize that to other students that are in similar cases, are often remedial in nature and based on deficits versus strengths. So thinking about that, we landed kind of on this idea of having a fellowship where people could come, get outside of their regular role, have the opportunity to really sit and understand like what the needs and the broad interests were within the community in order to create the school mission and vision. And that takes time. It takes a lot of time to listen. It's not engaging a community for an agenda, right? So sometimes it's like, let's engage the community so they think what we think. That's like not what we want to see have happen. Or let's take NACA and replicate that and plop it down out in Tohatchi. No, that's not what we want to see have happen either. It goes back to that dynamic around schools not being created for students to change to the school's mission and vision, but the school to be responsive to a community's mission and vision and what they want to see. And then from there, as teachers and school leaders, how do we make that happen? So it's a very different dynamic. So thinking about that with the help of many folks in this room, we also sat down and talked about like what are the core things we think that need to happen in order to do that. There's 5 different strands, and one is community transformation, thinking of excellence and relevance in curriculum development, our core values and the fusion of core cultural values of the community within the school, things about operations and management, for those of you who are like in the ops area as well, and then that the school is truly transforming the community to something different. We want to see this like 40 years from now. I mean, if you think of Emmett and Lenny and hundreds of other students that have been to NACA, they already have ideas about what they want to see in their community. We have a young man at Yale who took it upon himself and the Native group there this past semester to really like rise up and like share his voice about what was not going well in relation to like race relationships there. We have another young woman at Brown who just has helped establish Indigenous Peoples Day for the first time instead of Columbus Day, which was just celebrated this past week. And those stories go on and on from many of our students who are thinking proactively about how to change their community from within. So from there, our idea was to really support people in that process the most that we can, and not doing it in a way that is paternalistic and or kind of top down, but also giving enough flexibility and tying that to a set of core values and beliefs that we feel are important to Indigenous education. Ultimately, 10 years from now, if we have schools both in Indigenous communities across our country that are really answering that question, what is an Indigenous education and what does that look like? It's going to be different everywhere. I feel like we'll really have a lot of students that are going to connect around many different things that are important to them. So, yeah.
Great. And somebody that's actually implementing your vision is here on stage now, so I want to kick it to Kayla. Kayla, you are a NACA Inspired Schools Network Fellow and currently operating your own school. Can you tell us about your school and what experiences at NACA and as a NACA Inspired Schools Network Fellow prepared you to lead this role?
Sure. Well, yat esh a Kayla bigay in a chef to eat nishle touch eat bushes chin but atni dash che ki ani nationale zitik lui dent nasha. Hi guys, I'm Kayla. I'm one of the co-founders of Zitik Louis School of Empowerment, Action, and Perseverance, and we're calling ourselves DEEP for short. But DEEP we're in our first year of school, so there's a lot going on. But our first year is 6th and 7th grade, and we do have 4 focus areas. But I think for us, our school is really founded not to just be a school. we're really, like you mentioned earlier, it's more than just a school. It's a way to rebuild the community, to empower our community. So we have these 4 focus areas, and I think NISN, their vision, of this community-led and community-built, community-fueled schools, we went to our community, we asked questions, and we really got their input of what kind of school do they want to see, what kind of community do they want to see. And so these are the 4 focus areas of our school. So the first is service learning. So I think for a lot of Native communities, we have a lot of issues, whether it be potholes, whether it be diabetes. And a lot of times we say, oh, you got to wait until you go to college, wait till you get that knowledge or that piece of paper, and then you can do something. But for us, we think our students, they're powerful. They have powerful ideas, and they need the opportunities to solve their own problems. So with this component of service, they're really being those leaders. And then our other component is experiential ed through agriculture. In the Navajo Nation, we're a food desert, meaning there's not a lot of access to healthy foods. And I think for indigenous people as a whole, whoever controls the food controls the people. And we want our students to be in control of their own destinies. We want them to know how to cultivate the land. But I think there's that spiritual component as well. You don't know who you are unless you're connected to that land. And so for us, we really see it as a way to bridge culture, but I think also STEAM. Instead of learning these abstract concepts of chemistry or physics, they're actually doing it, they're actually feeling it, making it happen. So that's our other focus area. The other one is empowerment through culture. We want our students to know who they are. We want them to feel that it's okay to be Navajo. It's really funny, the students, we're in a new school, and so we're doing traditional days on certain days. And it's strange. Some of the students are, it's okay for me to wear my moccasins. It's okay for me to wear my jewelry. And so for them, schools aren't, the schools that exist now, they're not a space. They're not a safe space for them to even explore that. I think even with language, a lot of the young people in my community, they don't speak the language fluently. And so for them, to find a safe space to test that out, to start speaking the language, it's not always there. And so we're really trying to build that space just to be Navajo, to be proud to be Navajo. The other area is wellness, and we were really inspired by NACA, as you saw in their wellness wheel, and so for us, we really thought about it in the way that Diné people think about it. How do we think about wellness? How did we traditionally practice wellness? And also, how do we bring some of those practices into our school and our environment? So those are our 4 focus areas, but I think for us, there's a lot that NACA and the Inspired Schools Network has done. I think specifically, this is new stuff. This is radical. And our school, we're right on the border of Arizona and New Mexico. And so I feel like a lot of times we're still trying to do culture, we're trying to do indigenous education within these lines of standards or even state lines. So I think one of the issues that we're struggling with is how do we practice our vision and our mission when there's so many obstacles? So for example, we have 4 students in Arizona who are coming to our school, which is in New Mexico. It's right across the street. And what New Mexico is telling us is that they're not going to give us funding and those students have to pay tuition. So I think with the NISN movement, there's really an opportunity to navigate and dismantle some of these systems that prevent us from doing the work that we need to do for our communities. So I think there's just a lot of really great things that are coming about the network in terms of all the other stuff, but also the curriculum. It's really exciting. One of the other schools, Dreamdina, they have elementary students, and then our students are middle school. So I'm really excited to see how are we going to collaborate and really promote this idea of intergenerational learning, bringing elders from different regions. And so I think this network, it's just like our school, it's a seed, and I think it really depends on how much love, how much energy we put into it. And I think when we do that, it'll grow into what our community, what our ancestors have prayed for.
Beautiful. All right, at this time, this is your opportunity to ask our panel questions, and in doing so, Kara, do you have an additional point you want to make?
No, just that if you're ever in Navajo, New Mexico, definitely come by and visit Kayla's school, and also if you're interested in helping, think about some of these obstacles that we have related to what Kayla just shared, and thinking about real education sovereignty, and also thinking about transformation. We would love to engage you guys in that thought process as well, so appreciate that much.
Excellent. So we're going to go ahead and go to questions. Please identify yourself by name and region, and then go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, my name is Gustavo Gutierrez. I'm from Denver. I teach second year core member, second year career. Just wanted to say a couple things. One is it's awesome to see Emmett and Lenny just being positive in the future of what holds. And I think it's awesome that this school exists, because I think it's an antithesis to, unfortunately, what a lot of people feel like not culturally responsive teaching. Mm-hmm. There is a difficulty because there's like, I'm at a school where I feel like our kids are seen as what's the problem, when obviously you're proving that that's not the kids that are the problem, it's the system. So I have a deficit mind, but it's not of the kids, it's of the system. So it's going to be unsustainable if I don't somehow deal with that. So how do you guys support the teachers? And I think the other part too is, how do you help them when they get to college and they have to deal with, obviously, what they have to deal with, which is the wonderful example of the student at Yale. But I feel like as a person of color, like I'm angry a lot. And one of the things by seeing you guys, you don't really seem that angry. So, and I obviously have to do
it's Saturday.
Lenny, you got to hook it up with the wellness wheel. But I think obviously that it's just there is this frustration, and I think a lot of teachers of color, men and African American men, only like 3%. It's like we don't know what to do. We're burning out.
Let's hear from the panel.
So no, I was extremely angry after working in Marin County, growing up in Albuquerque, and then going to the Navajo reservation. So much so that when I returned back to Albuquerque, there was a lot of other people who were really upset about some things too. So I think like the idea of putting things into a space of transformation is super hard work. But I think like organizing your community and working with organizations that are already thinking about these issues in relation to inequities that are in existence, and they not in just education but other areas as well. But bringing those folks together to really think about like, well, how can we change that actively and create the space so that there's, you're doing the work and pushing it forward. I think, and I can say that it didn't come from, it's like, what do you do with all that anger, right? Like I think about some of our students, they come up with different projects that they focus on, but it's very much coming from a place of like dissatisfaction and frustration, but changing that into something positive so there's not that dynamic of feeling like, oh, we can't do that because, so-and-so won't let us. Well, we can do it. So I think it's a matter of like bringing people around that and really making it happen. It's hard work, but it's definitely worth it.
Dita?
I think about a concept of cultural safety and knowing who you're doing it for. There's a community partner of ours called La Placita Institute, and one of the mantras that the ED uses is, being a warrior is not fighting out of the hate of the enemy, but it's for the love of your people. And so I think that if you're operating out of the paradigm that is for the love of your people and your community, then there are too many things that are not possible. And so I think as many barriers as people can think of, and I think our people are really good at pointing out barriers and being like, this is why we can't do it. But when you start to say this is why we can, is where the people who are of like mind will gather, and I think you see it happening, right? I think Denver is a place where there's, it's very similar to how I think about Albuquerque and like the people there, and then what's happening. My sister lives there, and I think that I think Denver's ready for a change, and I think how do you engage the people? How do you engage the community? Because that's also diverse, right? Like I'm not from Albuquerque, but I think of myself as some of the people of Albuquerque now. So that's a good question.
Next question.
Hi, Desiree Rios, Las Vegas Valley. I have a question about something that struck me from the presentation was the emphasis on a national movement for indigenous education. I work in a mostly Latino school, and I want to know about the natives that have been called Mexican or natives that have become Latino. Like, is there a place for us in this national education movement?
I would say absolutely. I think that it's interesting, some of the work that we've been able to connect with other community organizations and neighborhood organizations across the country are thinking about the intersection of, I think Indigenous education is good for everyone, right? Like, we want our kids to be holistically well, we want them to be culturally sound and know who they are and have a purpose in life that drives them from a place that's really meaningful. I feel like both Latino, African American, and Native American communities can work together, and we see that happening in our state, thinking about the history of colonization and how that came about in New Mexico. But I think that there's a lot of stories that are common and a lot of things that are strengths that are common. And so I feel like drawing upon those makes sense for sure, and was in a conversation with an amazing school leader, Gata Sandoval, who's started a school in a similar community as you're talking about, and we were really thinking about what are the intersections that are the same, and there's many. And so thinking about how do we continue to build this work together from a community out versus having something come in, yeah.
Thank you. Next.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Natalie and I'm from Teach for Australia, and I really appreciate the conversation focused on Indigenous education because that's a very important focus in my own community. I have a question around how you manage diversity. You mentioned that there are 60 different tribal groups in the school, but you're teaching 5 languages, and obviously I imagine that there are some groups that are more dominant than others. So how do you validate the identities and include the histories and discourses and cultural practices of those groups that are smaller within the school?
So that's a great question, one that one of our fathers asked us the first year. He's like, you guys have an ambitious mission and an ambitious goal. I didn't think you were going to be able to accomplish it until Josiah came home and said, I'm not only learning about things in the Pueblo Laguna, but I'm also learning from other students in my class. So our teachers are exceptionally gifted at being able to prepare a curriculum that is open-ended, using essential questions and enduring understandings that allow the space for people to explore things like identity development. What's the culture that you're bringing? What are you interested in? Things that are like social issues that might span all communities within the city, but also their home communities, and then globally. So our students will learn kind of as they come into the middle school, kind of like they're about themselves and kind of where they're at. That broadens into thinking about kind of, across the country, and then that broadens into global Indigenous perspectives. With some of our partners in New Zealand, the Maori as well, we've learned a lot from them, but our students really have that perspective as they go through the curriculum. But it really goes to our teachers and having time. They have 3 hours every week to work together and critique each other's work. A summer institute that they participate in, and then also exploring what is an Indigenous education, how do you make that accessible to students given whatever area that they're teaching. So for really thinking broad, and then having a place where people feel safe to have those conversations and work through whatever it is that they want to learn about.
A couple of thoughts about that one. One of our teachers says, if you choose to acknowledge it, everyone is Indigenous if you trace far enough back. And I think all that to say is I think what makes Indigenous people, and I don't mean to overgeneralize, but is nuance to a story, right? Is that nuance to a story of origin and a connection to the land of that place. I think there's something that's ever prevalent for us is, as Indigenous people to this country, is those stories have been alive for, some of us say thousands of years, and it's only been the last 50 where that's been, 50 to 100 where that's an intentional removal of those kind of stories. And so many parts of the world have experienced colonization longer, and so I think, how do we encourage that identity development? We have a family from Boston who, for all intents and purposes, claim non-native. Last year, as one of the young ladies started to explore her own identity, she traced her lineage back to the Sami, indigenous Sami of Sweden. She said, those are my people. I'm not just a white girl from Boston anymore, I'm Sami. And that her grandmother still had some of those stories alive. And so I think it's interesting about the acknowledgement of identity, right? So it doesn't become, this is just a Native American movement, or just but the idea of Indigenous is an intentional word that should be inclusive, because I think the construct that we use now as Native American or Indigenous is one of political identity, and that could be very divisive. It has been for us, if I think about Lakota and Ojibwe, they're enemies, and I shouldn't exist because my people were enemies. And so once you start to break that down, and what is that really about, and get back to our core values, and how does that unite us, and how do we pay attention to those nuances insofar as they empower us and not tokenize us.
Okay, I have about 5 more minutes for questions, so we'll continue and try to get through them all. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Taylor, and I teach in Pueblo, Colorado. In my community, we have a lot of students who struggle with identity because of their families' forced assimilation and extreme poverty, and the biggest thing I see getting in the way of their education is their social-emotional wellness. And I just want to hear some things that you do in your school, like on a day-to-day basis, that helps develop that intelligence, because I'd like to start incorporating some of those things in my classroom.
So I think the model of the wellness wheel is a great place to start, and just having the time and space and a trusted adult and mentor to reflect upon those questions. And there's a lot of questions that go with that students can take a deeper look at where they are. And every single time an advisor has that conversation with their advisees, something comes out that students want to share. And so I feel like that's a huge thing, opening up the lines of communication. The second is that in our personal wellness curriculum, there are different things that relate to both prevention and thinking about proactive self-determination. One of our teachers talks with her students about the idea of self-determination, not just as only as a political construct, but also having that be a self-determined person of yourself. So we have 2 different groups that are in our school. One that's called Sweet Nations, which focuses on identity for young women, and then also the other, the YUPO group, which is a young for young men. And so they participate in a lot of different cultural practices that students can then own and incorporate into their lives. So I think having things like that has been super important. And then the last, I know that many of our teachers will do things like mindfulness activities, thinking about deep reflection, the use of writing, the use of singing, and things as far as that goes as well. So,
Mr. Silva?
Yeah, excuse me. And there's this other activity that we do. It's called, we adopted it from the Americans for Indian Opportunity. It's called Where Do You Get Your Medicine? And I feel that this is kind of like an internal reflection of the student. It's like, what am I passionate about? What makes me me? And I think when they hone in on those passions and they find out who they are and why do they exist, I feel that gives them a sense of pride, and that's a starting point. How can they use their skills? How can they use their passions to create an environment for themselves where they're happy, their happy place? But in turn, it's like who are my allies? Who are my go-to people? And I think that starts the recognition of there's immediate surroundings. Is that who can I go to for help? But also through, and I work with the boys group too, so I think, what are the gender roles? What does it mean to be an indigenous person, an indigenous young man? What does that mean? What does respect mean? What does respect mean? What does it look like? And I feel too, specifically, especially for girls too, I mean, that's a huge part, because again, identity and gender, and so there's a lot of things that pop up. But I feel that once they hone in on their passions, then they can take that and run with it. So I feel that the mindfulness works as well. So getting to know themselves, but also to where are they at right now, and where do they want to go?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we got 2 minutes. So quick question, quick answer, please.
I'll do this quick. Hi, my name is Marina, and I have 2 questions. My first question is, I find that a lot of charter schools or alternative schools, usually when they get the students that are going to participate in the program or in the school, they tend to get students that are already high performing, that are already doing well. So what is your model in that? Like, what students do you guys take in, and who, how do you decide who goes to your school? My second question has to do with when a student doesn't necessarily identify in terms of their sexuality, their gender, they don't identify with what traditional roles are. How do you support those students, or where do they fall in terms of like, I'm a lesbian, or I don't fall into the typical women's roles?
So to your first question, it's an open enrollment process, and so The demographics of our school are very similar to that found in Native American communities, which is basically school-wide free reduced lunch, as well as we see 2 to 4, different students coming in with being anywhere from 2 to 4 years behind as far as their proficiency in math and reading. And so it's just, any student that wants to come, but we also have students who come who are reading on a college level as early as 6th and 7th grade. So it's really diverse in that sense, and also across just where they're coming from and how connected they are to their culture, and how connected. So some students are very immersed in their culture, and some who have never been connected to it at all. So we just see a lot of different experiences. As far as that, I think that our teachers do an exceptional job of really thinking about the core element of having a secure identity, period. So students can explore that at their own pace. They can explore that within the context of the school, and that we're very inclusive in that sense, and that they're supported in finding out what that means for them at any juncture and in any shape or form. So often it's a place where many students have not felt included in the schools that they went to previously, and they are able to find a place where they're accepted as a family, and whatever that exploration needs to happen takes place for sure. And we actually have a formal structure as well of a group of students who have kind of formulated their own community to talk about those things for sure.
Okay, last question.
Hi, my name is Jamie, and I teach in my home community in Northern California, where we have a very strong Native population. And my question is teaching in a public school, in my particular district, unfortunately, they don't place cultural education at a very high priority. How can educators within the public school system do a better job, or what are your tips for increasing cultural safety within our schools?
So right next door to you, Oregon is doing some awesome things. Beaverton School District, they're doing some of those things about. There's a lot of their PD is really oriented towards addressing privilege and addressing race and identity within the educational equity movement. And it's really, I had a conversation with the principal that's leading the work over there, and just understanding your own social location in regard to the students and understanding their own stories will break down a lot of those barriers to establishing relationships, right? So I think one of the questions was our own teachers will often label students or families as troubled and have a whole narrative already made up before day one. And so how do we break some of those down, or how do we address our own perspective? And I think that's what I'm talking about, with social location, where some of us see the world differently and see students differently. And so how do we acknowledge that insofar as that we start to establish meaningful relationships with the students and the families of whom we're supposed to be addressing the education for.
Thank you so much, guys. Can I get a round of applause for our panel? It's truly inspiring work that they're doing, and so I'm glad we had a little bit of time here to kind of share their story and the vision and the hard work that they've put into this. So like we started, we're going to close in a respectful way, just real quickly. So if you can bear with us a few moments. And I know you guys have plenty of questions. These guys need to get out of here to go rehearse. And so I want to be very respectful of their time for the big event tonight. And so just be mindful of that on your way out. And then go ahead, Duta.
All right, one quick thing. Go and gather your stuff, and we're going to circle up again. And we're going to sing a song. We usually close it out, but we wanted to do this for you because we'll be returning to our families soon, tomorrow. And I know you guys will be traveling, whether it's by road, whether it's by plane. So this is just another song to help you on your journey. Please give our regards to your families, and thank them for your time here. So we would like to thank you for choosing this session. And if you have any questions regarding our school, our teachers, our students, visit our website, give us a call, or even just come visit us. So thank you very much. One last thing. This is going to be a round dance. So if there are any indigenous peeps that know how to round dance, follow them. You're just going to go to you go to your left. So it's just a step. It don't matter if you have rhythm or not, so just follow everybody.
Got it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you guys